What's up everybody, Maran here for another weekly update. So there's lots of exciting news to go over here this week, and the big news of course was the debut of the 2024 Mustang. I already did a video on that back on Wednesday when that debuted, and I also did a video earlier this week on the Chrysler 300C. So those are the two biggest stories of the week, so definitely check out those videos. I will have links to them, or you can also just after this video plays through, watch those videos. It'll be in the same playlist. But getting on to the other stuff. So, I covered the 2024 Mustang, but what they didn't include in the embargoed information they sent me ahead of time was the Dark Horse, which was the big missing piece that I'm very glad to see has also been rolled out here. So the Dark Horse is essentially the new Mach 1 with the same type of enhancements, but I'll break down the main differences briefly here. So first, they say the Coyote V8 will be more powerful than the regular GT and that they're targeting over 500 horsepower. It'll also get unique piston connecting rods from the GT500 and a dual throttle body intake. And since this Dark Horse is focused on track capability, it also gets a unique radiator. Second, thankfully this one will be getting the Tremec 6-speed manual, but it's still sad the other Mustangs don't get it in my opinion. It's really a bummer. I mean, the MT82 is fine, I have it in the Bullet, but I think the Tremec would have been a nice improvement here for this new generation. But anyway, I talk more about that in that video. But otherwise, yeah, the Tremec is available here, thankfully. You can also get the Dark Horse with a 10-speed automatic as well if you'd like. And they also both get a transmission oil cooler as well, again, to help with that track capability. Handling-wise, it gets unique suspension tuning, the K-brace, and the new lightweight strut tower brace, along with having the MagneRide magnetic dampers as standard, and all the other goodies from the Performance Pack as well, including the same 6-piston Brembo brakes and 13.9-inch rotors up front. They don't specify the tire sizes, but they say it gets a staggered setup with unique wheels that are 19 by 9.5 inches in the front and 19 by 10 inches in the rear. But then you can add on a handling package that bumps those up to 19 by 10.5 inches in the front and 19 by 11 inches in the rear. So again, very similar to the Mach 1 and the Mach 1's handling package. It's nice they're doing the new name here. I guess they don't want to, go with the heritage stuff as much for this new Mustang for whatever reason. But, it's really similar as far as the packaging goes here. Standard tires are Pirelli P0s, but the handling package will give you Pirelli Trofeo tires instead. The handling package also adds stiffer springs, larger sway bars. If you want even better handling, later in this model year, you'll be able to get carbon fiber wheels by Carbon Revolution, which is the same company that made them for the GT350 and the GT500. Styling wise, you get a unique grille and bumper and a dark graphic around the headlights and on the hood. Out back, it gets a unique rear wing and diffuser and dark exhaust tips. There's also a unique Dark Horse badge on the fenders and trunk. It also comes in a unique blue ember metallic paint color here, you can see, although I believe there will be other colors offered, but they didn't really specify. They also didn't provide any pictures of the interior, but they say it gets a suede wrapped steering wheel that has a drive mode button on it, along with blue stitching and seatbelts, plus a unique black alley metallic gloss interior trim. If you want to take it even further, there's going to be an appearance package for the interior that gives you a deep indigo blue leather for the seats, along with unique perforations. And there wasn't any info on release dates for these, so I'm assuming it'll be available along with other 2024 Mustangs next summer. So let me know what you think about that. I think, again, now that we have that, that's a nice option. But again, that's also going to be for those super expensive top, fully loaded Mach 1. I can't remember. I mean, those already got to like 55 or something. So, I mean, this will probably be close to almost 60 grand, I'm assuming. And, it's just going to be a lot. It just would be nice to just throw the Tremec and everything. And, but it is, nice to have this Dark Horse thing. I mean, personally, the styling and the tweaks are not my thing. But I mean, the whole 2024 Mustang's a pass in my opinion, but some nice improvements there if you do like the new interior and stuff. I'm not going to rant about it again. But anyway, interesting to see all of that. Moving on to another very interesting news story here this week. Australian website Car Sales is reporting that Toyota's Gazoo Racing has made a small batch of GR86s powered by a variant of the GR Corolla's 3-cylinder turbo engine. But it's actually downsized from 1.6 liters to 1.4 liters for that little turbo 3-cylinder. But it still makes over 300 horsepower the way they tuned it. And so partially because it's tuned to race in Japan's Super Taikyu race series to test synthetic fuels. And I can confirm actually that when I was on the GR Corolla launch event, I was talking to some of the Toyota employees, and they mentioned, I can't remember exactly who, but someone mentioned we have this engine, that we're putting into the GR86 just as, a test bed, for a racing thing. They essentially just said it fits in the GR86. And I responded with, well, that would be awesome to see, you know, at some point down the road. And, you know, it kind of just was left at that, and, you know, they kind of just moved on with the conversation. But they even told me personally, yes, this does fit in the GR86. Now, that's great news for tuners as well, who don't want to wait for, you know, Toyota to decide what they want to do with this. But it's interesting that according to car sales here, they are actually seriously considering this. This isn't just for a race series. So moving on with their report here, the Gazoo Racing chief engineer actually told car sales, yes, we are thinking for the future about the possibility of using it in a production vehicle, but there are no concrete plans at the moment. But man, I mean, if they're actually considering it, then to me that tells me that it's technically feasible, because my big holdup whenever I originally heard this rumor a couple of weeks back, and I kind of discounted it because, I mean, again, they told me that it fits, but I was like, okay, it fits, but it doesn't mean they're going to do it. And my holdup was that the fact that, you know, Subaru builds these at Subaru's factory, and, you know, they have the partnership with Subaru using the Subaru engine and stuff. I don't know how much freedom they have with Subaru to deviate from the agreed upon thing. You know, I mean, they haven't even bothered to, you know, try and do any kind of WRX, you know, motor version, which I think would actually be easier from a technical standpoint than doing this engine. But, you know, Toyota now has that dedicated line where they're building the GR Corolla and the GR Yaris and stuff. And, I mean, clearly they don't manufacture the Corolla there. They have, you know, Corolla manufacturing facilities in other places of the world to build normal Corollas. So I'm assuming they pull bodies from those other sites, you know, bring them in here to the GR factory, and then do all the stuff they need to do to them, potentially. I don't know how that whole process works, but I'm just thinking that maybe they can pull some GR86 bodies from that Subaru factory, ship them over to the GR thing, and then maybe, you know, do all the stuff they need to do for some kind of like GRMN version, you know, a higher performing version of the GR86. Although that'd be quite the name, GRMN 86. It's a lot of you know, letters and numbers, but, you know, I think, you know, if they're considering it, then to me that tells me that it's technically feasible and it's not a crazy idea. Which is really exciting because, I mean, you know, we've been begging for, you know, a faster version of the GR86, you know, the BRZ and the FRS way back when, you know, for the past, you know, over 10 years now. So if they actually did a factory turbo thing with 300 horsepower too, I mean, again, I don't know if Subaru would get a version, if this is using a Toyota engine. It also would throw off the center of gravity, which Subaru loves to say, you know, our boxer engine has a really low center of gravity, which is true. And so, you know, that's another component that, you know, they really have to change up the, you know, the handling characteristics and the tuning for this version. But it's also not a boat anchor. It's a tiny little 3-cylinder, well, especially if it's 1.4 liters, tiny little engine. And even if it's, you know, downgraded from the 300 horsepower race tune and they go to, you know, even 250 or something, it'd be a fun, you know, change of dynamics and stuff. And I think it would still handle very well, even if it isn't a boxer engine. So yes, but very interesting. The car sales actually got a little bit more out of the Gazoo Racing folks to, you know, say that they're actually considering it, which is great. And again, I'm not holding my breath for this. You shouldn't either. And I still think that the new, you know, 2.4 liter naturally aspirated motor is enough power. It's plenty of power to have fun with in the GR86. I have no complaints with power anymore. But, you know, everything could be made better with an extra, you know, 50 horsepower. So, you know, I wouldn't be mad if they came out with it either, as long as the pricing, again, wasn't insane. Because if it gets crazy with the pricing, you're better off just buying a turbo 4-cylinder GR Supra. You know, those are what, like 43, 44. So, you know, this thing would really have to stick well under 40 grand to make sense. But if they did it, I think it would be very exciting. So we'll have to wait and see about that, but interesting that they're considering it at least. Speaking of Subaru, though, this week they revealed the 2024 Crosstrek. Now, this is the global reveal. This is for Japan primarily. So there's going to be some minor tweaks to the US version. You know, we'll have our orange reflectors. They'll probably ditch the little headlight washers and stuff. But otherwise, you know, it should be basically the same here for the version we get. And as you can see, it has adopted the bolder styling here, like they just did with the new Outback, where the Outback looked really nice, and then they decided to make changes to it and made it look worse, in my opinion. And now they've done the same thing with the Crosstrek. I think the back end looks looks great. The front end is definitely polarizing. The new headlights look great. Someone on Instagram, I think, mentioned it looks just like a QX30 from Infiniti, which I think is actually very accurate, but that's a good thing. I think those headlights look great. The inside also has an improvement in tech where it just, goes to the same giant touchscreen as all the other Subarus. I'm not sure if that'll be standard or if that'll be an option, and the standard setup will be the split screen setup that you see in a base, Legacy, or Outback. But it does have that bigger screen, but that might be a downgrade for some people because, again, that gets rid of all physical controls for the most part. Aside from it, this still has a volume and a tune knob and a couple of buttons, but otherwise, all your audio controls, all your climate controls are going to be handled with this screen now, and kind of, moves the Crosstrek a little more high-tech than the simpler, setup that, everyone knows and loves from the past, almost 10 years here. Other things here, so moving on, they say on the inside, you also have seats that have been redesigned for better support. Now, there's not going to be much extra space, most likely because it looks like dimensions are pretty close to being the same as before, and that's really the right size. It is a good amount of space, even in the current Crosstrek that I reviewed, plenty of backseat space, plenty of cargo space for how little that little thing is. It's kind of impressive. So they didn't really need to change much. But they do say that it's on a revised version of the Subaru Global platform and has a new full inner frame construction like the new WRX. So that should, make it better as far as refinement, handling, things like that as well. And so the powertrain for us here in the States is still a mystery because in Japan this debuted with the 2-liter Boxer 4-cylinder that I believe is naturally aspirated, but it's paired up with an E-Boxer electric motor for some type of hybrid thing. Now, clearly, Subaru's going to want to go in electrified, fashion for the future, but I don't, we haven't seen really much of that yet aside from the Solterra. All the other electrified stuff that the rest of the world gets with Subarus, we don't get here in the States. Outback still has carryover engines for the new 2024 version of that, so my guess is that, it's going to be just carryover stuff here in the States for the Crosstrek. Same 2-liter, 2.5-liter. I would love to see a WRX powered version. I'd love to see a hybrid version. I'm not even sure. We'll see if the plug-in hybrid sticks around, but that wasn't a hot seller. So, I just don't know how that one's going to, go about, if that's going to, keep going or not. But I'm not sure when Subaru's going to give us all the U.S. details on the 2024 Crosstrek here, but they have plenty of time considering this likely won't be arriving until next summer. So, 9 months from now at least. So we have a while to probably wait here, but at least we know what it looks like now. And anyway, let me know what you think about that one in the comments below. Moving on here, Ferrari this week has revealed the Purosangue, which is probably the most exciting vehicle of the week for me. I mean, this thing, I love Ferraris, and this is, in my opinion, one of the probably actually the coolest SUV ever to be made, in my opinion. It's just so cool. They refuse to call it an SUV in silly Ferrari fashion, but it is an SUV, and thankfully it's just as awesome as we were expecting here though. So it runs the 6.5-liter naturally aspirated V12 engine that does 715 horsepower and 528 pound-feet of torque and completely obliterates the horsepower numbers of all of its competitors easily. It also has that same glorious 8,250 RPM redline, so this thing is still a screamer that loves to rev. This screaming V12, and now you have it in a 4-door vehicle that's family friendly. Add this one to the lottery dream car wish list. So it does have a few changes here that allow it to make about 80% of the torque by 2100 RPMs though, so it should feel a little more punchy around town than maybe another Ferrari with this engine would feel. It also has a dry sump oil system to allow the engine to sit lower in its front mid-engine placement, which should give it some really great handling as well. It's also combined with a rear transaxle to help it to have a 49-51 weight distribution front and rear, and that transmission is the 8-speed Ferrari DCT they've used in lots of other stuff, and it's made to the same all-wheel drive system the GTC4 Lusso used, with it being the odd system where the all-wheel drive only works up to 125 miles per hour, and then after that the rear wheels take over and it's just rear-wheel drive. But, if you're struggling to get through snow and you're doing over 125, you're going to have bigger problems to worry about than whether all 4 wheels are spinning. So, it should be, still a really solid system. And it'll do a 3.3 seconds 0 to 60, a top speed of 192 miles per hour still for this thing. And despite its 4,482 pound dry weight, which means it'll be even heavier for the curb weight, Ferrari focused on making it handle like a Ferrari still. So it has rear wheel steer, here. It has side slip control from the other Ferraris to allow it to do some nice drifts on you. And beyond that, though, it has a totally new suspension system here that uses multimatic spool valve dampers, but unlike the ones in the Camaro or even like in the Colorado ZR2 and things like that, these new ones are active and use electric motors to apply force to the damper to control body motions, and it can also lower the car by 0.4 inches during aggressive cornering, so it actually really kind of dive into the corner and hunker down mid-corner, which is wild. And they say that it's so good that Ferrari was able to get rid of the anti-roll bars completely. It doesn't need anti-roll bars because of how advanced the suspension system is, which isn't the first time. McLaren also threw out the anti-roll bars a while back, but very impressive. It sounds like it's going to be, a really dynamic handler here. And so the tire setup will certainly help as well, with 255 wide tires in the front, but 315 wide tires in the back. So nice and meaty. I also think it looks great. You got that long hood. It's got the aero bridge there in the front. There's cool floating fenders and the curvy proportions. It just looks so good in my opinion. The power closing coach style rear doors are a cool touch too. And Ferrari says that it makes getting into the Purosangue's back seat easier, which it does sound from other reviewers like it's a little tight, but it sounds like it still is spacious enough that 4 adults can fit in it easily with room to spare still. And speaking of that back seat, it's strictly a 2-seater setup though, and those rear seats are almost as sporty as the front ones, which is nice to see. The dash is pretty unique as well there. You can see with the dual pod design, it features a really big passenger display, but I do wonder how Apple CarPlay is going to work on this thing, because I believe other Ferraris have it too that don't have a center screen, but I've never used one, so I have no clue how that really works. But considering this is an everyday kind of Ferrari, I was expecting a touchscreen like what you get in the Roma, with a vertical one, like the GTC4 Lusso had a nice big horizontal screen in the middle. So this is an interesting choice. I think it looks super cool. As far as how it works in reality, will be another thing, but I think that it's, just really sweet that you have this, cool design. And, speaking of other practicality notes here, so it only has 16.7 cubic feet of cargo space in the back, so don't expect it to be quite as usable as other SUVs, even some other competing SUVs potentially. You can see it's a pretty short little back end there on it. But the rear seats do fold down if you want more space. It's still not really the big point of this thing. It's just, I think, mostly for carrying 4 friends in comfort, not having them having to hobble over the front seats like you had to do in the Lusso. With this, they have their own doors and, that glorious V12. That's all you need. And so anyway, it'll start around $400,000 and deliveries will start late in 2023. So awesome to see that. And some other awesome V12 news here. Pagani this week revealed their new hypercar called the Utopia. And so it's designed for simplicity, lightness, and the pleasure of driving, according to Pagani. And they weren't messing around. I'll get to how they took that very seriously. So part of it is thanks to the manual transmission, which is back on the options menu here after being absent from the Wyra. And so it's a new X-Track 7-speed manual with exposed linkages and a glorious gated setup. And so cool. It's 7 speeds, and the gated thing with the metal clink for the gates is going to be so satisfying to drive, I'm sure. And so further driving home the point about simplicity, it has thrown out the Wyra's touchscreen and has no center screen at all anymore, with simple manual controls and analog gauges. There is a screen in between the analog gauge cluster there to display some car-related info though, but I think Pagani's kind of taking the same approach as Bugatti, where they were saying how they're trying to resist any kind of in-car screens for the most part, because they're like, these are cars that need to still work at Pebble Beach in 50 years, and we don't know how these screens are going to hold up, and what they're going to do. So keeping things simple, I think, is the way to go for collectible stuff like this, and so I think that's why Pagani probably did that as well. And also, again, people don't need to be playing around with a touchscreen when you're driving a Wyra, so I totally get that. And beyond that, the rest of the interior is beautiful in typical Pagani fashion here. But getting back to the mechanicals, it runs the AMG-built 6-liter twin-turbo V12 that does 852 horsepower and 811 pound-feet of torque. And aside from the Gordon Murray cars, I believe this is the only other V12 manual setup currently on the market. Even, Gordon Murray was the first one to do it. And aside from that, we haven't had a manual V12 thing in a long time. So, great that we're having these options options again. Other performance info here is that it uses a carbon titanium fiber for the body and passenger compartment. It has double wishbone suspensions front and rear. Brakes are 6-piston calipers in the front, 4-piston in the rear, and the wheels are forged and have carbon fiber turbine covers to help extract hot air there around the edges, which is cool. And so only 99 of these will be built for the first run before the inevitable, special editions and variants, which, all these, hypercars seem to have, a couple dozen different special editions over their lives. So sure, there will be more than 99 overall, but 99 here for the regular ones to start, and there was no price given for those, but I believe Wyras were I think $2.4 million to start or something like that. So, easily this thing, is probably a $3 million car. What does it matter? Everyone just writes blank checks for these anyway. So, anyway, very, very cool to see that. Honda again has teased the next generation 2023 Pilot this week in its new Trail Sport version, and this time we get a much clearer look at both the front and the back end, and it appears to be much boxier and more reminiscent of the second generation, while also blending some styling here from the new CR-V up front a little bit as well. And as far as the Trail Sport version is concerned here, Honda says that it's tested on challenging terrain all over the country, and the new 2023 Honda Pilot Trail Sport will be the most rugged Honda SUV ever, with standard all-terrain tires, steel skid plates, off-road tuned suspension, and expanded all-wheel drive system capabilities. All sounds very promising. This type of thing, especially, lots of people are excited about these days. So I think it'll be great for them, and it'll be revealed this fall. So cool to see that. Chevy has revealed the 2023 Tahoe RST Performance Edition. And so it gets more power, better handling, and better braking. First off, the 6.2-liter V8 does get a new intake and exhaust for 13 more horsepower and 7 more pound-feet of torque, now doing 433 horsepower and 467 pound-feet of torque. It'll do a 5.8 second 0 to 60, but the towing has been unchanged at 7,600 pounds. The suspension gets the same setup as the police pursuit vehicles, actually, with bigger anti-roll bars and shock tuning, and it's lower by 0.4 inches in the front and 0.8 inches in the rear. The brakes are also from the cop car version of the Tahoe here, with Brembo calipers front and back and 25% larger discs. So that's pretty cool. And so otherwise, visually, you get the regular RST badges and polished exhaust tips. So no visual cues that you got the Performance Edition, really. And it's a big upcharge, too, costing $8,525 on top of the RST's base price of $66,595. But that does include the luxury package, which also gives you heated steering wheel, heated second row seats, adaptive cruise, blind spot monitoring, and a couple other things. So that package alone is probably a few $1,000, and then this adds a few thousand on top of that. It's debatable. Maybe you can do some of the stuff in the aftermarket for less with an intake and exhaust and springs and stuff. But, I think, having it from the factory and stuff and having it here in this Performance Edition, will make sense for a lot of people. And it'll start production later this year. So cool to see that. In some other American SUV news here, Lincoln has revealed the refreshed 2023 Corsair this week. And so it gets a new front end here with a much larger grille there. And you get some new wheels. But otherwise, actually, the rest of the exterior is the same. The bigger changes, honestly, are on the inside, where it gets the 13.2-inch touchscreen from the new Mustang. Same exact screen, same Sync 4 software on it. And also, like the Mustang, it throws out most of the typical physical controls for, climate and stereo. That stuff's all gone. Lincoln spins it to say, well, this gives them a more spacious and airy cabin, but they also cite the same kind of research that Ford did for the Mustang, saying that their customers, want more technology in their vehicle, which they interpreted as getting rid of all the physical controls. So we'll see how people react to that in reality, and the actual buyers, not just focus groups, but that's their justification here. So that's what they're doing. It also has the 12.3-inch digital gauge cluster that now has some new software on it as well. And one nice change there for the interior is the option of a backlit dashboard with a star pattern on it, which is a cool touch. There's also some new colors available inside and out, and it also can now be had with Lincoln's Active Glide system, which is their version of Blue Cruise for hands-free driving. And Ford recently announced that both systems will be getting auto lane changes, as well as better lane positioning and better slowing around corners. And it's interesting because, this is based on the same thing as the Ford Escape, so I'm assuming that the new refresh for the Ford Escape that we've seen spied in the past, whenever that finally comes out, we'll also get the Ford Active or the Ford Blue Cruise, which is great because so far we've only had it in the Mach-E and also in the F-150. So to have it now in the rest of Ford's lineup and Lincoln's lineup is going to be great, and will really give them a strong competitive advantage, in my opinion, over many of the others out there. So that's great. And mechanically, though, it's all carryover aside from the top 2.3-liter EcoBoost engine being dropped due to the low take rate. We'll see if maybe Ford can finally do an Escape ST and throw the engine in that maybe instead, or maybe they'll just throw out the engine altogether for this range. But you can either get the the standard base engine here in the Corsair, the 250 horsepower 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo, or you can still get the 266 horsepower plug-in hybrid as well. Those are the only two options left, and so they're available to order now and should start arriving in early 2023, and there's no pricing revealed for those yet. Another engine option that's getting dropped here is the EcoDiesel for the Ram 1500. So Ram announced this week that the 2023 model year will be the last one in order to get the EcoDiesel here for the Ram, and so this leaves GM as the last one because Ford got rid of their diesel for the F-150 a couple years back. So Chevy's gonna be the last one standing, Chevy and GM, or GMC. So that's cool. And Ram's reasoning though is that they're focusing on their electrified future, but also I don't think the EcoDiesel sold super well. I don't think it did terrible with sales, but I'm guessing, behind the scenes, it was justified to, just get rid of it. And so as a result, they're not going to be offering it here after 2023. But, you still have a full model year to get one if you want it. And so anyway, interesting to hear that. And for some other Ram news here, Ram CEO revealed to Autoblog this week in an interview that Ram is actively and aggressively looking at smaller truck segments and mentioned that they could leverage Stellantis' wide array of brands for additional models. So this could go a couple of different ways. This could mean that they're either considering using the Gladiators platform, and that's very Jeep, with the Wrangler stuff that it has and everything. So I don't know, that'd be a little bit harder to spin for some type of Ram truck, but they also could help pay off some of the development costs for the Gladiator, since I don't think that's a super hot seller like they were expecting it to be. So, maybe they'll try and make that work. There's also other options, there's Fiat-based Ram trucks that are sold in Mexico and South America. And I actually have people that send me spy shots every once in a while where they see a Mexican vehicle here in North America and they're like, what is this? And it's, just a Mexican vehicle they sell down there, but they don't sell up here. So that's possible, but that also would require a lot of retooling because I believe they would have to build it, somewhere in North America, and I'm not sure where those are built, but, it's also, those vehicles usually aren't as safe and not as refined as American buyers typically are wanting and are needing with our safety standards here in the States and stuff. So, I don't know how great of an option that is either, but, clearly Ram desperately wants to be in this segment. But I guess they don't want to just pour out the money to just, hack up our 1500 and try and make something mid-sized or something Maverick-sized. So I don't know. Sounds like they're working hard at it. Hopefully they figure out something here because I think it's a huge, money, just gold mine for them. And if they can figure it out, I'm sure they'd have a ton of sales. So. But interesting to hear that they're really working hard to try and figure that out. One other quick little Stellantis story this week is this is another week special edition for the Charger here. So, every week they've been rolling out these new last call special editions for the Charger and Challenger here for the 2023 model year. And so this one is number 5 out of the 7. This one's called the King Daytona, and it pays homage to drag racing legend Big Willie Robinson. And unlike the other special editions so far that have been Scat Pack based for the most part, this one is based on a Hellcat Red Eye wide body jailbreak, meaning 807 horsepower from the supercharged V8. They're all painted Go Mango in honor of his car, and it also gets unique graphics on the back, unique badges, and hood pins in the hood there. It also gets orange stitching inside. Only 300 of these will be made, and there's no pricing for those yet, but cool to see that. And for the last news story here this week, Australian website Car Sales again has an interesting report here. They spoke with the Vice President of Vehicle Development for Mercedes about the future of the V8 and V8 engines in the Mercedes-AMG products. And surprisingly, they're open to the idea of keeping them around longer than everyone was expecting. Mercedes is really aggressively, going into the electrified stuff. So here's their the little quote here. He said, "In the end, it has to fulfill our overall CO2 strategy, and we have a clear path on that one, being CO2 neutral at the end of the 2030s by 2039. And from 2030, we want to be pure electric. But if there's still a customer demand for gasoline-powered V8s in some regions and it's still part of our offering, why should we stop it? So, again, it all just comes down to how much people are willing to pay for this stuff. Because he said that despite the 2025 Euro 7 rules that make V8s very challenging to keep around in Europe, they still might be able to make a business case for it, again, in other parts of the world, depending on regulations and on demand. So he added here, you can find technical solutions for every request and every regulation, but sometimes it's combined with higher costs, and the customers are not always willing to pay for it. And so lastly, when the idea of synthetic fuels was brought up to him, he said, we have looked into it, of course, but in an energetic way, it doesn't really make sense. How many kilograms of CO2 do you produce to generate the synthetic fuels? We follow this, and if this changes, it's not such a big thing to fill synthetic fuels into your car. But right now, we are not following this path. And so I was under the impression that synthetic fuels were truly carbon neutral, and that's what Porsche claims, is that, at least the way they're generating their, synthetic fuels with their plant, I think their plants in Chile, I believe that one is truly carbon neutral, but I guess they're saying that not all synthetic fuels are produced in a carbon neutral way, because I was trying to figure out, what he meant by that, and I found a study from 2021 that found that producing synthetic fuels actually takes more electricity than just charging up a battery does, and this is in addition to the delivery emissions of having to, again, still have a tanker, deliver the physical fuel versus just sending electricity through the grid. So I think that Mercedes is adding up all that stuff as well and being like, yeah, it's great that, it's carbon neutral as far as the fuel goes, but it's also still emitting stuff. And, this shows that, synthetic fuels, they still do burn. And in some cases, the emissions are a little bit worse than for regular gasoline, and all the transportation stuff and, generating, the fuel still. It might not be as carbon neutral, in all cases as, Porsche at least is, doing with theirs. And so I think that's why Mercedes has some reservations here about synthetic fuels. And even Porsche has said synthetic fuels, their goal with it is that it is not going to replace electric stuff. It's not going to save the gas engine. But what it will do is give those people who have the existing gas engine stuff an ability to keep those things powered up, even if gasoline goes by the wayside, and it'll just give, exotic car owners and, people who can afford to spend, $9 a gallon, those people can still fuel up their stuff. And, it won't be quite as bad for the environment as, the current, stuff is. So, this is why, a lot of companies, if this made sense and it was an easy fix to just do synthetic fuels, I think everyone would be rushing into it. Everyone would rather do that. It's much easier than changing up everything else with the grid and, there's all the electric stuff and the battery mining and all that. It's a lot of extra hassle that I think these companies wouldn't go to if it wasn't for the fact that it's still much better from a CO2 standpoint than the synthetic fuels. But hopefully, things can be improved. But I can understand Mercedes' reasoning now. I kind of looked into it a little bit more. And anyway, so yeah, but it's good to hear that, they're open to keeping the V8 around. If people want to pay a premium for it, and the regulations in those countries, primarily the United States, I'm sure, and other stuff, maybe Saudi Arabia and a few other places, they're going to allow, the gas stuff, a little bit longer, if Mercedes has it, it's probably going to be old V8s. Don't expect anything new or mind-blowing. But, if they keep that 4-liter twin-turbo V8 around for the next 30 years and people want to, pay $200,000 for, a V8-powered, I don't know, S-Class or something like that, I'm thinking Mercedes will be like more than happy to sell it to you. They don't care if people are willing to pay for it. It's just going to be a cost thing of, how many of those people, how big is the demand, to bring the cost down to, get to a sweet spot where people will actually pay it. I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm sure it'll probably just end up being G-Wagons and, supercars, and that's about it. But anyway, very interesting to hear all of that. Lastly, I want to give a huge thank you to all of you who are members of the Matt Moran Motoring Club. So we did have one new member join this week. So I want to give a huge thank you to Branto123 for becoming a member this week. I hope you're enjoying the perks, and I really appreciate the support. And I also just appreciate the support from all the members here. It's really great having you all along as well. And so if you want to join along with everyone else, there's going to be a link in the description and also buttons here on the video page and the channel page. And again, stay tuned for the live stream happening probably the last Sunday of this month, where all those members will get priority answering there in the live stream. But anyway, that's it as far as all the news this week, guys. Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.